3.2.
I have another question for you, Professor Cox. If the number of English speakers continues to grow, do you think more regional varieties will develop?
Perhaps, but I think it's more likely that we'll end up with 4 or 5 regional languages rather than 4 or 5 regional varieties of English around the world.
Which other languages do you think will become world languages?
It's difficult to say, but I think probably Arabic, Spanish, French, Hindi and Chinese will be the most spoken languages.
Professor Cox, we've talked about the spread of English and other world languages. I also wanted to ask you about the varieties developing in each country. In your opinion, will a country like England have more or fewer varieties in future?
Well, I believe it will have fewer varieties because people move for work and study more today than they did in the past.
Yes, I suppose that when people finish school, they rarely stay in the same town to study, live and work.
That's exactly right, Anthony. Take London and the surrounding area, for example. In the last 50 years, its population has more than doubled, but many people who work in London live in towns and villages across southeast England, quite a few miles away from London. In the past, people in these villages spoke with a local accent or dialect. Now there is much less variety. In fact, over the last few years, an accent known as estuary English has spread across the southeast. Even now, you can hear big differences between people in their 20s and their grandparents' generation.
Professor Cox, can I ask a question? In the lecture, you said that the spread of English is not only having positive effects, but also negative ones. Can you explain this a bit more?
Well, because of the popularity of English, many other languages are disappearing. People need a common language in which to communicate, and unfortunately that means that minority languages are not used as much. If we consider how closely linked language and culture are, then you could argue that some cultures are dying alongside these languages.
I have another question for Professor Cox.